Okay, Phil Lee returning with another episode of Civil War Chat. It is now November 30th, Monday, November 30th, 2020. Yesterday, I talked about an incident involving uh, a theft of a farm animal during the Civil War. Same situation could be and did happen often during Reconstruction. But the point is that the family, what was petty theft in normal times, became life-threatening theft. So after the Civil War, when the slaves were freed, uh, many of them just went off because they had never experienced it before. Some went off to in search of relatives and far away, possibly other states. Others just went and wandered around because it was the first time they could do it. It led to a problem though of vagrancy. When they just took off to go somewhere and they didn't have any food, it wasn't unusual at all. In fact, it was pretty common for them to steal a chicken. During normal times, that had been considered petty theft, and if they had gotten caught, they'd have been punished. But it wasn't as severe a transgression as it would be during Reconstruction. But during Reconstruction, they're free. So in the first year, from say Lee surrendered in April of 1865, and from April of 1865 through December of 1865, it was a serious problem. And partly because the ex-slaves, the freedmen, were somehow led to believe that they were going to get 40 acres and a mule at Christmas time, 1865. Well, it didn't happen. Nonetheless, vagrancy, petty theft, was a serious problem. And as a result, as I mentioned, Mississippi and South Carolina, as well as some other states, but particularly those two, because they had majority black populations, passed what today's historians call black codes. And if you look at the black codes, particularly in those two states, they certainly went too far. I think, if memory serves, they would restrict blacks and to essentially prevent them from getting licensed in trades where the states wanted to apparently keep them white because they were prosperous trades like the blacksmithing. Uh, there were regulations like that. I think that they could probably get those licenses, but it was much harder. And if they weren't doing anything and they were simply vagrants, they could be essentially conscripted into labor contracts. So today's historians, as you might guess, with their intense focus on racism, consider the black codes just a way to reestablish slavery in another form. And in fact, during the Reconstruction, a number of Northerners thought the same thing because few of them really had any experience with slavery. And in the free states, for example, the slave population was about 1% of the total. In the border states, it was higher. But in the 11-state Confederacy, it was 40%. So this problem of vagrancy during Reconstruction was significant. What I want to do now is to read an episode from Company Aytch, which is a memoir by Tennessee private Sam Watkins. He was about 20 years old when he went into the 1st Tennessee Regiment at the start of the war as a volunteer. And he wrote, in about 20 years later, his memoir of that whole war. And it was used a lot in Rick Burns's popular Civil War video that was shown on, for multiple days on public broadcasting back in the early 1990s. I have written, I've got, this is Watkins' book here. This is my version of it. And what I've done is I've taken his book. I had done hardly any editing, just a little bit of shortening some of his paragraphs, which were often too long. And but I didn't really change anything other than that. The what I did do though is provide 250 annotations to clarify some of the things he's talking about, because he sometimes used antiquated language, and he sometimes would express, he used names to describe battles that we don't use anymore. So I wanted to clarify where he was, which battles he was really talking about. And then he has some tall tales. He just basically got carried away and told things, put some incidents in here that are simply not true. But this one I think was probably true. And let me just pull it up and share it with you. I think you'll find it interesting as I do. One day, a party of us privates concluded we would go across the Canasauga River on a raid. We crossed over it in a canoe. After traveling for some time, we saw a neat-looking farmhouse and sent one of the party forward to reconnoiter. He returned in a few minutes and announced that he had found a fine, fat sow in a pen near the house. Now, the plan we formed was for two of us to go into the house and keep the inmates interested, and the other was to toll and drive off the hog. I was one of the party that went into the house. There was no one there but an old lady and her sick and widowed daughter. They invited us in very pleasantly and kindly and soon prepared us a very nice and good dinner. The old lady told us of all her troubles and trials. Her husband had died before the war, and she had 3 sons in the army, 2 of whom had been killed, and the youngest, who had been conscripted, was taken with a camp fever and died in a hospital in Atlanta. And she had nothing to subsist on after eating up what they had what they then had. I was much interested and remained a little while after my comrade left. I soon went out, having made up my mind to have nothing to do with the hog affair. I did not know how to act. I was in a bad fix. I had heard the gunfire and knew its portent. I knew the hog was dead and went on up the road and soon overtook my comrades with the hog, which they had skinned and cut up, and was being carried on a pole between them. I did not know what to do. On looking back, I saw the old lady coming and screaming at the top of her voice, "You got my hog, you got my hog." It was too late to back out now. We had the hog and had to make the most of it, even if we did ruin a needy and destitute family. We went on until we came to the Canasauga River, where lo and behold, the canoe was on the other side of the river. It was dark then and getting darker, and what was to be done, we did not know. The weather was as cold as blue blazes and spitting snow from the northwest. The river had to be crossed that night. I undressed and determined to swim it, and I went in, but the little thin ice at the bank cut my feet. I waded in a little further, but soon found I would cramp if I tried to swim it. I came out, put on my clothes, and thought of the gate about a mile back. We went back and took the gate off its hinges and carried it to the river and put it in the water, but soon found out that all 3 of us could not ride on it. So one of the party got on it and started to cross. He did very well until he came to the other bank, which was a high bluff, and if he got off at the center of the gate would capsize and he would get a ducking. He could not get off the gate. I told him to pull the gate up to the bank so that one side would rest on the bank and then make a quick run for the bank. He thought he had got the gate about the right place and then made a run, and the gate went out from under, and so did he, in water about 10 feet deep. My comrade, Font C, who was with me on the bank, laughed. I thought until he had hurt himself. He laughed until I thought he had hurt himself. But with me, I assure you, it was a mighty sickly grin. And with the other one, Barkley J., it was anything but a laughing matter. To me, he seemed a hero. Barkley did about to liberate me from a very unpleasant position. He soon returned with the canoe and we crossed the river with the hog. We worried and tugged it and got it into the camp until just before daylight. We got it into the camp just before daylight. I had a guilty conscience, I assure you. The hog was cooked, but I did not eat a piece of it. I felt that I had rather starved, and I believe that it would have choked me to death if I had attempted it. A short time afterward, an old citizen from Maury County visited me. That's his home county. My father sent me by him a silver watch, which I'm wearing today, and $800 in old issue Confederate money. Now, this is something that I'm interjecting here. The Confederacy, to deal with inflation, would sometimes take in the old bills and issue new ones to try and control inflation. I took the $200 of the money and had it funded for new issue at a 33 1/3 cent discount. The other 600 went to Vance Thompson, then on duty at Montgomery, with instructions to send it to my brother Dave Watkins, Uncle Asa Freeman, and J.E. Dixon, all of whom were in Wheeler's cavalry. At some other point, I knew not where. After getting my money, I found that I had $133 and I could not rest. I took $100 new issue, going by my lone self back to the old lady's house. I said, "Madam, some soldiers were here a short time ago and took your hog. I was one of that party and I wish to pay you for it. What was it worth?" "Well, sir," she says, "money is of no value to me. I cannot get any article that I wish. I would much rather have the hog." Says I, "Madam, that is an impossibility. Your hog is dead and ate up and eat up, and I have come to pay you for it." The old lady's eyes filled with tears. She said that she was perfectly willing to give the soldiers everything she had, and if she thought it had done us any good, she would not charge anything for it. "Well," says I, "Madam, here's $100, new issue Confederate bill. Will this pay you for your hog?" "Well, sir," she says, drawing herself up to her full height, her cheeks flushed and her eyes flashing, "I do not want your money. I would feel that it was blood money." I saw that there was no further use to offer it to her. I sat down by the fire and the conversation turned to other subjects. I helped the old lady catch a chicken for dinner, went with her into the garden, pulled up a bunch of escalots, which apparently are a type of onion, brought 2 buckets of water, and cut and brought enough wood to last several days. After a while, she invited me to dinner, and after dinner, I sat down by her side, took her old hand in mine, and told her the whole affair of the hog, from beginning to end, how sorry I was, and how I did not eat any of that hog, and asked her, as a special act of kindness and favor to me, to take the $100. That I felt bad about it, and if she would take it, it would ease my conscience. I laid the money on the table and left. I have never in my life made a raid upon anybody else again. So that's Sam Watkins' story. Just one episode of his story. And this book is full of a lot of other episodes. That's kind of a poignant one, but he's got some funny ones. And if you want to get a copy of this, you can buy it at, I think it's $15 at Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Company Aytch, Coaytch, which means Company Aytch of the 1st Tennessee Regiment. If you want it from me, it's $18. I'll sign it, and I will pay postage if you're here in the United States. Okay, so here we are, last day of November 2020. I'll be back to you in January. I keep forgetting to mention, but up there in the upper right, you'll see a notification bell. If you click on that bell, you'll become a subscriber and you'll be notified every time I have a new video. Okay, thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.